joining us now is maritime security expert Ray Powell, Director of Sea Light. Welcome back to Morning Matters, to our show.
Thanks, Gretchen. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. You've been sounding the alarm over heightened activity in different areas of the West Philippine Sea. I do know that I saw you post first before the PCG announced anything on what's happening over in Batanes.
Yeah.
You described the movement as bracketing.
Yeah.
Is that unusual?
Yeah, so yes. This is actually the first time I've ever seen the China Coast Guard operate east of the archipelago, of course, the northern part of the archipelago with Batanes. So I think it was very clearly tied to China's concerns over what it believes is too much talk about Taiwan coming from the Philippines because of where it happened and the unprecedented nature of this particular deployment.
So it happened after the remarks of the president?
It did, yeah. Now, there have been sort of, undercurrents of discussions between the Philippines and Taiwan over the recent months, and I think that probably Beijing has been nervous about that. And so now, what the president said in New Delhi was actually pretty measured and reasonable. If there is a Taiwan contingency, the Philippines is looking at a major humanitarian problem. There are a couple of 100,000 Philippine workers in Taiwan.
Correct.
There will be refugee flows coming across the Bashi Channel. So it's not exactly I don't think that he crossed any lines, but Beijing is on such a hair trigger when it comes to Taiwan.
Well, let me quote the president, what he said. If there is a confrontation over Taiwan between China and the United States, there's no way that the Philippines can stay out of it simply because of our physical geographic location. If there's an all-out war across the Taiwan Strait, or no, that's not included. If there's an all-out war, then the Philippines will be joined into it. We will have to defend our territory and sovereignty. In addition, there are a large volume of Filipinos in Taiwan.
He might as well have said the sky is blue. I mean, honestly, that's just the fact. But with Beijing, in many cases, you're not allowed to state facts when it comes to Taiwan. They just right now they've become so ultra sensitive about Taiwan, and this is not a change in anything except for Beijing's own attitude.
Well, Beijing has been conducting exercises over near the Taiwan Strait, right? Why is it unusual this time?
So what's made this different is their deployment around Batanes. So not just to the west, which is actually fairly unusual already, but to the east is completely unprecedented for the China Coast Guard.
It's going near.
Right. Yeah, I call it bracketing.
It was more of the defense against anything that could happen with Batanes.
I think it's very much messaging, right? So, a total of 3 China Coast Guard ships is what we tracked. And by the way, they have redeployed. So since yesterday, they're all sort of on their way back to China. But I think it was a very specific message. You saw the Global Times, China's state-run newspaper, put out a complaint about Marcos mentioning Taiwan in New Delhi. So I think it's a very specific message about that. But they are on their way back to China.
Now, what patterns have you been seeing around Taiwan? I mean, is an invasion imminent?
So I continue to believe that China does not want to have to invade Taiwan. What they want, and it's similar to what they want out of the Philippines, they want capitulation. They want to communicate the message that resistance is futile. You might as well make it easy on yourselves and just give up quietly so that we don't have to have this cross-strait invasion. So I think that they are showing a lot of muscle to try to influence Taiwan's politics so that eventually they capitulate peacefully.
Hence the exercises around Taiwan.
Right.
Okay. How about, you mentioned that today there's an activity going on in Scarborough Shoal.
Yes. So this is what the Philippines is called Kadiwa, which is their effort to support their fishermen at sea. So
refuel to give food supplies.
Yeah, and actually to buy their catch while they're at sea, so they don't have to come all the way back to Zambales in order to resupply and offload their catch. So these don't happen terribly often. It's a pretty new program, and so I have seen there's at least one Philippine Coast Guard, at least one fisheries ship, and the and one support ship that they send out to do these missions. So I've seen they actually have been out this morning, and they are experiencing quite a lot of Chinese activity at Scarborough Shoal.
How many ships are you monitoring around that area?
So right now that I can see, there are at least 7 China Coast Guard and 14 Maritime militia ships surrounding Scarborough Shoal, up to a radius of about 25 to 30 nautical miles.
Okay, they've kind of heightened or tightened security around that area.
Yeah.
I mean, ever since they were able to, shut out the Philippine vessels, right? I mean,
Right.
Ever since last year, I believe.
Really, yeah. So about say April or so of last year into about April of this year, we tracked a spike in Chinese activity around the shoal, and we're calling it an exclusion zone. They're basically screening out any Philippine vessels that try to come in, perhaps, especially any large Philippine vessels, any Philippine government vessels. They basically are trying to
But
keep.
have the fishermen still been able to go inside?
From
or
what I
near
have
the
heard,
shore?
it has become very inaccessible to the fishermen, and if they are able to get in, it's going to be just the smallest of boats.
Is your tracker able to detect the fishing boats? Or
Not really, no.
Not really.
So they have 2 different kinds of what we call the automatic information system. There's the Class A AIS, which broadcasts at a strength where it can be picked up by satellite, and those are the ones that I can track. Any Philippine fishermen that have AIS usually have the Class B, which is much weaker, and so
Okay.
it's hard to see that far out from shore.
But these Kadiwa runs, how often do you see this?
This is, as I'm remembering, we had one a couple of months ago at Sabina Shoal. So this is only really the second one that I recall.
Okay. How about over in Pagasa Island? I mean, I think you posted something also about an activity there, harassing a fisheries vessel, BRP Roma Penet.
Yes. So that was, so it went out to Pagasa. So again, I don't know, there haven't been any announcements from the government what happened. All I could see is that the BRP Roma Penet left Pagasa going toward the
Sandy
west
Cay.
in the direction of Sandy Cay, met a number of militia and Coast Guard vessels, turned around and went back. Now, I don't know what its intentions were. Maybe it only wanted to go out that far, but it looked like it was being impeded by the militia and the Coast Guard.
We also know that the situation over in Sandy Cay is same as what's happening in Bajo de Masinloc. Very, very sensitive.
Yes.
And China trying to
I think that
really put a blockade over those areas.
Yes, essentially. Yeah, I think that's a fair description of what's going on at
So
Sandy
it
Cay.
accompanied BRP Roma Penet all the way back to Palawan.
Almost to Palawan. So what is, I think, again, it was a message. It's like, we didn't like what you did, so we are going to escort you almost all the way back to Palawan. So, they usually will turn off, before they get to what we call the contiguous zone, which is 24 nautical miles out from shore. And that's what they did. They turned off, but they went almost all the way back to Palawan with Roma Penet.
It kind of reminds me of what happened during the civilian convoy Mission 1, where they accompanied us for a far distance, not just asking us to turn back, but they were
Made
it was
sure
like
you
they
went
were
home.
Escorting us out.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that very well. So you were on the ship then? Yeah.
Okay, so describe to us. Do you think there's an escalation overall from China in the recent month? How long has this been going on?
Certainly, I think, particularly around Bajo de Masinloc, I think that there has been a significant escalation just in the sheer number of vessels they've got. It really does look like a big ring around the shoal now. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a permanent state of affairs. This is an awful lot of ships to have, out there at any given time. But, if I went back a year and a half, I mean, especially a year and a half, 2 years, you might see 1 China Coast Guard, 2 Maritime militia. Right now we're looking at 21 ships, and those are just the ones I can see on AIS. There may be additional ones that are dark. So it is a big statement that China is making, and certainly I think they are letting the Philippines know that if we want to control Scarborough Shoal, we can.
Well, of course, this is happening in the greater context of, the timing of what happened up at Batanes, coinciding with the president's visit to India,
Right.
where they announced a strategic defense cooperation with India.
Yeah, strategic partnership, yeah.
What does that bring to the table of the Philippines, you think?
So when they announce these diplomatic upgrades, a lot of that is very symbolic, right? So it does bring into play other diplomatic forums that they will initiate. But it is a very symbolic step to say that we are, they have sort of levels of where these partnerships can go, and they'll get more.
What does strategic partnership mean, to be exact? We have one also with Vietnam.
Yeah.
We have one with Japan, Australia, and South Korea.
So each level that they sort of upgrade to introduces additional structural changes to the diplomatic forums that they will have. So they'll have more forums with more people. And so, again, there's this, just to give you an idea, Vietnam has China as its highest level of partnership. I believe it's something even higher than comprehensive strategic partnership. I can't remember exactly what the term is.
Higher than mutual defense?
No. No, but within Vietnam's terms, because Vietnam has no allies. But Vietnam also believes China is its greatest threat. So there's a certain amount to which these things can be a little bit of theater, right? But I think with respect to the Philippines and India, it's actually a pretty important step for the Philippines, which is trying very hard to internationalize its security issues and its relations because it's under such threat. And India can't be accused of being just one more U.S. ally, right? Because India is very much not aligned, and so it has very close relations to the U.S. It also has very close relations to Russia, which is making the U.S. very unhappy right now. It tries to be multi-aligned, is what it says. So I think for the Philippines, as it tries to internationalize this issue, it's an important step to bring in, the world's largest democracy, and yet one that's not directly aligned to the U.S.
Well, I know India has its own border disputes with China, but what could be the interests of India in this region?
Yeah. So India has actually expressed interest for many, many years. They call it the Act East, they call it. They're very interested in the South China Sea, the fact that there are vessel flows. In fact, a couple of years ago, it had a major exercise, a big exercise with ASEAN, which is the only time I've ever seen ASEAN have a naval exercise within the 9-dash line, and it only did it with India. So bringing in India actually, I think, helps to remind China that there are more countries out there that are interested in their excessive 9-dash line claim.
Just the United States.
It's not just great power competition with the U.S., right?
But it still, makes one ask, why would India want to get involved in all the, heat here in this region, right?
Well, to some degree, India, so as you mentioned, it has a border dispute with China. So, and it also, like other countries like the U.S., wants to complicate China's strategic problem. It doesn't want to make it too easy on China to be able to focus in on the border, wants to say, look, India is willing to be over here, working with partners over here and over there, that kind of thing. So, it wants to make sure that it keeps China on its toes.
And how could the Philippines maximize this partnership?
Well, I think you're already seeing some of that with, for example,
missiles.
The BrahMos missiles, of course. You're also seeing it with the joint patrols of the Maritime cooperative activity that it did with India. Again, moving outside of that U.S. alliance structure and bringing in India changes the dynamic a little bit and says this is an international issue. It's not just an alliance thing.
But at what point can these international powers really do something more than just have the exercises? Because we've seen that a lot, even with the French Navy.
Sure. I think what the Philippines is doing is taking the long view, and that's wise because this is not a problem that's going to be solved by a joint patrol. This is not a problem that's going to be solved by...
It's mostly political statements.
Yeah,
right?
and I have described what China is doing in the West Philippine Sea as a maritime occupation. And how do you if you're the resistance, how do you combat an occupation? You do it over a long period of time, and you wear the occupier out. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to convince the occupation force, in this case a maritime occupation force, over the long term that what it's paying to conduct this occupation is not worth the cost. In other words, at some point they sort of wake up and say, why am I doing this? Why am I uniting all of my adversaries against me? Why am I causing myself all this problem? Why am I spending so many resources, defending water against, when I could just sort of back off and not do all of these things? And that's how occupations end in the end, is the occupation force just gets tired and says, why are we doing this?
But as you mentioned, taking a look at the activity of China, in the past year, they've sent more maritime militia ships, they've sent more CCGs.
Yeah.
Isn't that just eliciting that kind of response from China, putting out more ships out at sea, making the situation more difficult, allowing them to encroach on more space?
We often refer to this as escalation dominance, right? Basically, I can escalate more than you can. And that's true, right, when it comes to the Philippines. China just has more stuff. It has more ships. It has 1.4 billion people. It has a much larger economy. And so I think the answer is, from the Philippines, is, okay, yes, that's true, but how long are you willing to keep this up? How many problems are you willing to cause yourself? Because China has been causing itself a lot of problems by its aggression. And in some ways it does it because it's very, very self-confident right now, and it believes it can get everything it wants just by pushing really, really hard. But will it still believe that in 2, 3, 5, or 10 years?
Well, China, after all, was very sensitive to perception and optics, right?
Right.
As we've seen with the Taiwan equation.
Well, and what China has been trying to do with the Taiwan equation is basically convince everybody that it's not worth their problems to mess around in Taiwan, China's internal affair, right? And so, and some countries listen to that, and they, so recently we've had, several Pacific Island countries that used to recognize Taiwan stop. But I mean, last week on our podcast, I interviewed the president of Palau, and he's one who has stood up and said, no, we're not going to do that, even though in 2016 we had 100,000 Chinese tourists, and right after that, when we refused to stop recognizing Taiwan, they basically cut them all off, and we had that economic contraction. But you know what? Our principles mean something to us.
Before we let you go, I just want to pull up the photo that you tweeted early this morning, about 30 minutes ago.
Sorry, this is a different one. This is one that I did a couple of days ago.
Yung kanina na photo nakita natin. Ito.
Yes.
What are we seeing here?
All right, so there you see right in the middle, you see the Kadiwa support ship right in the middle, moving out from Manila Bay. You see the BRP Roma Panet is up there to the north. That came out also to support from Palawan, and down in the south you can see the Teresa Magbanwa, the Philippine Coast Guard, and then you can see all of these Chinese ships. You see the Maritime Militia, you see the China Coast Guard, as I said.
What's the distance from Scarborough Shoal of
it's
those
about
Chinese ships?
25 to 30 nautical
it's
miles.
Very far from the 12 nautical
they're not able to.
sea.
Yeah.
Okay. One last question. The PCG has expressed concern over the heightened presence of research vessels. Are you able to detect the research vessels, and what could they be looking at?
They do a number of things. One is they do legitimate scientific research. They also map the seafloor for, support their submarines, and they want to kind of keep track of what other people's submarines are doing. They also make sort of maritime assertions of their jurisdiction. And they say, so they'll go into another country's exclusive economic zone and say, we're going to research right here because we can, and we claim this. So they will often do that as well.
So it's not just in our EEZ. They do this in other
We've seen it in Malaysia's EEZ.
Oh, okay.
We've seen it in... Actually, the craziest example I saw was 2 years ago. They went into to Vietnam's EEZ and actually did a survey for a month drawing the Chinese character for China. They actually drew a character. Chong. Yeah, they actually Chong. They actually drew Chong in
What?
Vietnam.
They were making those movements?
Yeah, it clearly served no scientific purpose whatsoever. All it was a month, and the research ship was surrounded by militia and Coast Guard vessels. So it was basically a survey in force to draw the character for China in Vietnam's EEZ.
And to send a message again.
That was the only purpose of it. It served no scientific purpose whatsoever.
Well, thank you so much for, keeping us alert of all these developments out at sea. We do need an extra pair of eyes to tell us what's happening out there when we don't get the updates real time, right? Thank you so much again for your insight and for being with us here in the studio, joining us, flying all the way from Davao.
I was in Davao yesterday, yep.
Thank you so much. We have maritime security expert Ray Powell. He is, of course, the director of Sea Light.